Hello and welcome to Coffee Conversation. So glad to have you with us today. Of course, I'm joined by our co-host, Renata. Renata, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Renata Moore, Chief Communications Officer with the Cumberland County Schools.
Thanks, Renata. And I am Joaquina George, the Family Engagement Specialist for Cumberland County Schools. And today we have some very important guests with us. We're glad to have them join us. We have Miss Tracy Hill. Tracy is at Douglas Byrd High School. She was our 2019-2020 Cumberland County Schools second runner-up Teacher of the Year. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we have with us Miss Maureen Stover, who was our 2019-2020 Teacher of the Year for Cumberland County Schools, but holds the role of the 2020 Boroughs Welcome Fund North Carolina Teacher of the Year. Maureen, thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you. And in this busy time, of course, we're getting ready for school. We're thinking about the changes that are happening. And you all as teachers remain a very important role in the lives of our students and our families. They have missed you greatly in the last few months. I miss you because we have not been in the building. So we just want to touch base with you as teachers and get some of your input and feedback on how things are going. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Maureen and Tracy, this is for both of you. Can you tell us a little bit about what was done differently to prepare, or what you're doing differently to prepare for the 2020-2021 school year?
Well, I guess I could start out. First of all, I want to say that hello to everyone, and that I'm excited about the upcoming school year. And to mirror what you said, Ms. George, I was saddened, and as I'm sure everyone else was, when we had to abruptly leave school because of our current situation. And I do miss not just my children, but the students that I used to see in the hallways that I didn't even really know their names. I just knew their faces, and I missed all of them, and I'm excited to even see their faces, although we have to do it virtually at this moment. So to prepare for that, first of all, I had to do some emotional reflections to make sure that I had myself together, because I understand the pandemic has been hard on everybody. So, I wasn't alone. At first, I felt like I was like, why am I acting like this? Why am I feeling like this? Mm-hmm. So, but then talking to other coworkers and other teachers, I understand that it's been a hardship emotionally on everybody. So I wanted to make sure that I had some emotional efficacy in myself, and that I had myself together, because I can't adequately serve my students if I'm not well. So I had to prepare myself emotionally. And then, of course, I had to make sure that I was technologically sound, because I'm kind of an old school teacher. So I had to make sure that I had those technical aspects together. Still working on it. Gonna get there. We're gonna get there together.
Work in progress.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of learning, a lot of progressing that we have to do. We have to bring some of our older teachers who are so stuck on paper pencil. We have to move ourselves up digitally. And so I've been kind of working on that this summer, and just trying to do a lot of buy-in to what my students will need to make sure that I'm prepared.
That's good.
Maureen, what about you?
So my year will be significantly different this year, because as the 2020 Boroughs Welcome Fund North Carolina Teacher of the Year, I will be an educational ambassador, and I will be traveling around our state. I also have the opportunity to be an advisor on the state school board. I'll be working with Best NC. I'll be working with Boroughs Welcome Fund. So I have some really great opportunities to be able to do some really good things for the students in North Carolina, to help ensure that we are maintaining a progressively better education every single year for those kiddos. And so I'm very excited to have my new role, where I'll be able to be in an advisor position and have some ability to drive home some really great opportunities for our kids that will benefit the students in Cumberland County, but also will benefit our students statewide. But like Tracy said, it is very important that we're considering that we need to make sure that we are giving teachers the opportunity to be able to realize that they need to take care of their social emotional learning as well. And so one of the things we're getting ready to launch, which I'm really excited, this is actually my first public time of getting to say it, but we're going to be launching some teacher support groups with the Regional Teachers of the Year, where teachers will be able to join in on a Google Meet once a month and just have an opportunity to talk to each other, have an opportunity to share ideas, have an opportunity to share apps they found that work really great, or maybe a way that they figured out to engage their kids or connect with their students. And I think that that's going to be something really beneficial for the teachers, because they're going to be able to talk to other teachers and just have a little bit of time to bounce some ideas off and have a support behind them saying, hey, you're doing a great job, let me pat you on your back. And I think the other thing that's really important that teachers are doing right now is they're finding ways to give grace. So they're finding ways to give their students grace, they're finding ways to give their colleagues grace, and they're finding ways to give themselves grace, because we're literally building an airplane as we're flying it. And that's difficult. It is hard to try to change the way you're teaching. And like Tracy said, you know, we have teachers that right now are used to teaching, standing in front of their classroom and using a whiteboard and markers. And now to have to transition from that to a totally digital platform is not necessarily intuitive to everyone. And I think everyone is doing a fantastic job of giving each other grace and helping their colleagues. And I think that's going to be one of the big silver linings that we're really seeing coming out of the pandemic, is that we're seeing so much collaboration among our teachers to ensure we're still giving our students what they need. And I'm really excited to see what we've done in education because of the pandemic, because it shows us that teachers are 100% focused on making sure we figure out ways to deliver the information to our kids. And we're also finding ways to still engage with our students and make sure that we're addressing those social emotional learning needs. So I'm very proud of North Carolina educators, and I'm very proud of what we've done in Cumberland County to make sure we're still meeting all those needs of our students.
That's great. And you know what, when you mentioned, Maureen, the idea of giving grace, that is so very important, because like you said, we're building this plane as it's flying in the air. And our district really understands that, and that, you know, we have Operation Smooth Start right now. You know, that's been implemented. Our superintendent announced that at the August board meeting. And this will give us several weeks, a couple of weeks for everyone, parents, students, teachers, all of our educators, the opportunity to adjust and, you know, and I mean, get to know one another as we're in this new forum, and, you know, learning your login, how to log in on the computer, and without feeling like, oh, I got, you know,
your time crunch. Yeah.
So grace and some time, opportunity to kind of breathe and just smoothly move into it. Thus, Operation Smooth Start. So that's great that you mentioned that. But you know what, something I want to ask is, in the midst of this pandemic, have you all been able to find something that you think will enhance your teaching experience?
So for me, and again, I've been such an old school type of teacher, you know, you do what you know, but when you know better, you do better. And so in the midst of this summer, I had the opportunity to meet with some of my cohorts who are a little bit younger than I am and who are more technically sound. And so all of those apps that are out there, such as Flipgrid and Padlet and things like that I've never used, partly because my curriculum doesn't really call for that type of digital learning. But now that we're in this virtual world and this virtual way of doing things, I had to embrace those new types of teaching methods. And so of course my pedagogy is going to change, you know, and I'm being flexible enough. That's my new word, flexibility. I'm learning to be flexible enough to adapt those new apps and those new ways of doing things into my curriculum. And I'm excited about it. Like even today, excuse me, just today, I was trying to think, oh, what else can I do that's digital? What else can I do? So we, as teachers, I think, have to be able to evolve, have to be able to bounce, just like we expect our kids to do. And so those are the new things that I've been trying to do. I've also been trying to utilize new lingo. So instead of sticking strictly to my teacher words that I use, I start to use words like, well, I wonder if, you know, and that to me invokes the inquisitive side of students instead of just saying, this is how we have to do it. So trying to change my way of thinking, trying to change the lingo that I use, and also trying to change those digital platforms that I've been using has been a big help for me this summer, and will be moving forward.
That's great. That's great.
Maureen, you've been doing this teaching thing for a while and doing it very well. And we realize that teachers have a very difficult job, especially in this time of so much transition. And it's oftentimes a thankless job. But so we want to first stop to say thank you. Thank you both.
Thank y'all. We appreciate all of our teachers. Yay.
All of the teachers in your hard work. But Maureen, can you tell us about some of the things that made you decide, yes, this is what I want to be doing professionally, and why you have maintained your role and stance in education, even with all these changes, and being in a difficult position as teachers begin to really change, like Tracy said, their way of speaking, their way of teaching. What makes you want to continue in this profession?
So I am unique because I came into teaching as a mid-career change. So I was in the Air Force, and I served in the Air Force as an intelligence officer. And then when my oldest son was in kindergarten, his teacher needed volunteers to come in and help out in their classroom. And so I had an opportunity to come in and start working in his classroom. And I found that I had a real knack for helping kids, especially the students who struggled to understand things. So like the ones that were having trouble keeping up with whole group instruction and just needed a little bit of extra attention, or needed something explained in a different way to help them be able to understand how to do a skill, or to read a book, or to figure out a sight word. And I loved it. And that was about the same time that I was transitioning out of the Air Force, and I was trying to decide what I was going to do for the rest of my life when I was a grown up. And I thought, you know what? I love teaching, and I had so much fun teaching that I thought this would be a really great avenue for me to go into. And I am so happy that I did, because teaching is truly my calling. And in the Japanese culture, there's a concept that's called ikiga. And ikiga means your reason for being. But in the Japanese culture, it means a lot more than that. It's what motivates you to get up in the morning, what makes you excited to get started with the day. And for me, that's kids. I love being in a classroom with students. I love having an opportunity to see them have light bulb moments. I love having the opportunity to work with them, both in what we're learning content-wise, but also helping them develop socially and emotionally, and educating the whole child. And kids are our future, and they're just amazing. And so I love being in a classroom every day. I love being with kids every day. When we had to switch to the remote learning, I started finding new ways to still make those connections. So I started doing silly things so that the kids would log in, you know, like dress up or have like a silly meme that came up. And then I started teaching lessons from my backyard and my garden so we could talk about photosynthesis. And I would go videotape bees flying around a bush so we could talk about pollination. And it just, I found ways to still connect with my kids, and because they're still the most important thing. And so for me, you know, definitely I would much rather be in a classroom teaching my students than having to teach them remotely. But I think there's still ways that we're able to connect with our kids. And there's also some things that we can do remotely that maybe we couldn't do if we were in our classroom. So I saw some teachers that were doing some really cool things, like making cookies in their kitchen to teach the elementary kids fractions. So they would say, like, this is 3/4 of a cup, and they would make the cookies, and then the kids can make the cookies along with them at home. And that's something we wouldn't be able to do in a classroom necessarily, but it's so much fun for the kids to see that. And then they see the relevancy of the fractions and how those are important to understanding math. So I think that teachers have really been very creative and very innovative in the way that they've approached the transition to the remote learning. And I feel like it's, in some ways, they're doing amazing things to pull in families and to still be able to connect with their kids. And I feel like that's such an important part of education. And I'm thrilled to see what teachers have done, because there's so many cool ideas out there that teachers have done to continue connecting and continue having their passion of being a teacher. They've just transitioned it to accommodate the pandemic.
That's good. And you know what, Tracy, you took a different route as well, didn't you? Did you come straight? Because I do remember you working over there
did.
with us over at HR, weren't you?
I did. I actually started, and this goes, my love for being a teacher was birthed many, many years ago when I was about 14. And my mother was actually a bookkeeper in the school system. And during the summer, I used to go and visit her in her office and found the love of bookkeeping and being around the teachers and being around that educational atmosphere. And so my very first job in the school system, I wanted to be a bookkeeper, but there was none available. So I was a principal secretary, and then I migrated up to being a school bookkeeper. I was a school bookkeeper for about 13 years, and then moved over to the human resources building where I was salary analyst. And then I just wasn't satisfied. And actually what made me become a teacher was I wanted to finish my degree. I had never finished my degree. So that speaks to it's never too late to whoever's watching this and you need to finish your degree. It's never too late. So I was in my mid-30s. And my son was going to college, and he said, Mom, you always tell us to make sure you get your degree, but you haven't finished yours. And I'm a firm believer that I lead by example. Yeah. And so that right there was the pivotal point that made me go back to school. When I went back to school, I actually went for my criminal justice degree. I wanted to work with juveniles in the court system. And then, to make a long story short, I ended up, I was working at Human Resources, and one of the ladies said, well, you could teach. And I was like, well, I guess I could work with youth in the school system as well as the court system. And so I got a job at the same school that I was a bookkeeper at Douglasburg. Wow. And never looked back. Wish I had have done it long ago, because I found out, like Maureen was saying, to me, teaching is a ministry, and it certainly is a calling for me. And it just clicked. And the love of those students just seated down in my heart, and I can't see myself doing anything else for the rest of my life.
That is awesome. It's always interesting to, be able to talk with people who, it's great when your route is direct, but then when you get out in life and you see and experience different things, and then something clicks and says, wait a minute, for both of you. And that's just awesome, because, you all are awesome teachers. So that's just great. Now, let me ask you this, with that in mind, going into this new school year, how do you all plan to get to know your students this year virtually? I mean, how do you do that?
I think that's definitely a concern for a lot of teachers going into the school year. As we transitioned into the remote in the spring, we'd already had our students. So the elementary teachers at that point had them for almost 3/4 of the year. And the high school teachers had our students for half of that semester. So we already knew our kids, we knew their names, we'd gotten to know their personalities. And that's definitely going to be a little more challenging going into this year. But I think there's still ways that you can interact with those kids and you can get to know them. And so some of the ways that I think would be great to be able to engage with your kids would be things like writing them letters, because how many people get real letters in the mail anymore? How fun would that be for a kid to get a letter from their teacher introducing themselves, or maybe ask the kids to write you letters back and include like a self-addressed stamped envelope so they can pop it back in their mailbox and mail it back to you. That way you can get to know them that way. There's also some inventory quizzes that I've seen teachers making, like through Google Forms, or having like one-on-one interviews where they're getting to know their students and getting to know their kids. And so while I think it's definitely going to be different, because it's so natural for us when we're in a classroom with our students to get to know them and to get to know their personalities and to figure out kind of what makes them tick, I think there's definitely ways we're still going to be able to do that going into the remote learning environment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that's very important for you to really, go right ahead, Tracy. Go right ahead. Go right ahead, Tracy. I'm sorry.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. But I just wanted to chime in and agree completely with what Maureen said. We have to come up with creative and innovative ways. And, even I thought I was reading a book this summer, and it was about how to make friends and win people over, and by Dale Carnegie. And it was saying that call people by their name. They want to hear that. And it seems like such a really, really small detail, but by calling a person by their name, it makes them feel important to you. And that's one of the things that it kind of dinged in my head, because that's what I would make sure I did on the first day of school as they were coming in the classroom. So I said, well, as they come into the virtual classroom, I'm going to make sure that I recognize their face, and call them by their name. And that is the birthplace of establishing a relationship with them. Because if we don't have a relationship, they're not going to want to hear what we have to tell them.
Exactly.
So for me, it's all about building those relationships, having them to trust you and trust that you have their best interests at heart. And again, like Maureen said, it's doing those little things, coming up with those innovative ways to do that.
Exactly. And you know, those first impressions too. We have first impressions of students, but then they have first impressions of us. Mm-hmm. And for them to trust us that we're going to give them what they need in order to be successful this school year, successful in life. Mm-hmm. That first impression that we give them of whether we care or don't care, concerned or not concerned, is what will stick in the back of their heads as we're moving forward in this year. So yes, without a doubt.
And I think another big piece of it too is, you know, we're always modeling for our students. So our students are looking toward us and they're taking our lead. So if we're doing things to establish those relationships, if we're doing things to identify our kids and figure out who they are and what's important to them and what makes them tick, our kids are going to follow suit, and they're going to do the same thing with their classmates. Even though we're virtual, they're going to do the same thing in other classes. And I think that that's really important for developing those really strong bonds that the students have with each other and also with their teachers. And, you know, we may, hopefully we don't have to ever go back into a remote environment again. Hopefully this is just a short thing that's going to happen at the beginning of the school year, and then we're back to normal. But I think, you know, because now we Zoom a lot for business meetings, and now instead of having to travel across the state or across the country, we now realize that you can stay at home and meet with someone virtually. Our students will probably be practicing these skills as they move into their careers and as they move on to college. And so I feel like we're also giving them some of the skills, and we're modeling for them how do you establish those relationships if you're doing something in a remote virtual environment, because they probably will see a lot more of that going into the future. And so we're helping to develop those skills to make those 21st century skills to make them college and career ready. And I think that's really important too. And it's also really important that we're making sure that we're identifying what our kids need. And I think developing those relationships and establishes that as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Great points about building relationships.
Yes.
That's key. I'm sure the kids are nervous about who my teacher is going to be. That's always exciting over the summertime. Who's going to be the next school year? Who's going to be in your class? So how this is done virtually will be interesting, but nonetheless, it will happen. Good things will come out of this.
Absolutely.
So you both have talked a lot about things you've done over the summer, things that you've seen to help teachers prepare for the next school year in remote learning. What do you think is going to be the most difficult thing for teachers as they begin to start the school year remotely?
I think, again, and I know we keep talking about this, but it's like the elephant in the room. The thing that is the most difficult is not being able to be face-to-face with our kids. I can speak for high school because I've never really worked in elementary or middle school, but even at the high school level, those students look for that emotional connection. And particularly some high schools, they look for that connection because they may not receive as much at home for whatever diverse reason that there may be. And so they look for teachers to be some of everything for them. Even if they have a very, very good home life, it may be some little small part that they're looking for their teacher to be. So for me, I think teachers will definitely miss that face-to-face, one-on-one connection. That, you know, it's something to be said when you're in a virtual environment and you meet someone, whether it be a student or whether it just be meeting a new boyfriend or new whoever. You meet someone virtually is very different than being in person with them and having that chemistry and that connection. Same goes for our students. You know, when we meet them, there's an immediate connection that happens because, you know, we're there face to face. And so to me, that would be different. It would be different because I can't be around my student and say, you know, let me help you with your pencil, or let me give you this supply, or let me give you this material. Or when my kids do well, I have treats and gifts that I give them that I can't just throw across the virtual world. So I think we'll miss that that face-to-face connection in that aspect. I think it'll be difficult. And then again, as I touched on a little earlier, it may be just a little difficult to kind of tweak some of our curriculum to match the virtual technologies. You know, for me, my subject I teach is accounting. And accounting, we're mostly paper pencil, although there are digital platforms out there. The way we teach it is the old school way. And so we've had to adapt and learn new ways to teach our curriculum virtually. So I think those two aspects are two of the greatest ones that will be missed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What about for students? What do you think? We kind of talked a little bit on the teacher's perspective, but what do you think would be the most difficult piece of this remote learning for students?
I think their social connections with their friends. You know, I have a young daughter at home or a teenage daughter, and she was saying that, you know, because of the trepidation of her parents, then there's some holdback from the parent doesn't want that student to interact with other students. You know, even though we're allowed some grace to go to the mall here or there, you know, that particular parent is still a little afraid of letting their student go. So we have some parents that are hindering their children from going anywhere. And so those students miss that social interaction with their students, those connections that they have with students their age, you know, and being able to do more than just talk on the phone, being able to play a ball game. You know, sports has been a big outlet for my personal children. And so I know it's been a big outlet for a lot of students, and being able to not unleash that wild side of them by being on the football field, and even as a cheerleader, my daughter's cheerleader, not being able to unleash all that extra energy they have built up. I think they will miss that. Certainly, whether they want to admit it or not, some students will miss being in the actual classroom, sitting in the desk and using a pencil and writing out their work. You know, so it's just a difference for all of us that we have to, like Maureen said, hopefully embrace only for a little while, and things will go back. But definitely some things that we will miss.
Maureen, were you going to say something? You look like you were going to speak earlier.
Yeah, mine would be very similar to what Tracy just said. I think definitely the social piece is going to be really difficult for students. You know, because so much that happens in school doesn't really have anything to do with the content we're teaching. So much of what we're doing in school is social piece. So much of what we're doing in school is helping kids develop how to have a discussion with somebody, or how to apply their knowledge, or where to find good knowledge. And that's not necessarily the core content standards, which are extremely important, but a lot of the other little pieces that we do in school, that's what I'm going to be missing. I know, like, you know, what I found I really, really missed when we went into remote learning was having a room full of kids first thing in the morning who are, you know, asking me to print papers, or they're doing a TikTok dance in my classroom, or they want to try to make it look like there's water shooting out of a balloon and we're trying to videotape it. I mean, there was always something fun they wanted to do. And walking to lunch, because at FSU we walk across the campus to take the kids over to the lunchroom, and just walking over to lunch with them and just having conversations with them as we were doing that. And those are the things that it's difficult to replicate when you're in a remote learning environment. And so I think that those social pieces and just having a chance to talk to kids and getting to know them, and having the kids talk to each other and getting to know each other, I think those are the pieces that the teachers are really missing, and that the kids are really missing too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you all something. Do you all have any suggestions for parents as far as getting ready for the upcoming school year? Suggestions for parents, things that they can do with their students to help those students be successful ultimately this school year?
I think my first suggestion would be give your kids teacher grace, because realize that this is teachers want to be in our classrooms with our kids. Teachers don't want to be not with your student. But it's difficult to manage because this is not what we're used to doing. And so give that teacher grace, and just realize that there's going to be some hiccups along the way, and that the teacher is doing everything they can to give your kid the best possible opportunity and education that year, but that there's going to be some hiccups, and just to kind of go along with the flow with those, and realize that the teacher is doing their best and truly trying to provide a high quality education for your child. But then also keep those lines of communication open, because I think sometimes, you know, maybe a teacher doesn't realize that your student's having trouble getting the online document that you provided, or that the speaker volume isn't working on their computer, or, you know, whatever it could be that's making it difficult for your student to be able to engage in the online classes. So keep those lines of communication open, email the teacher, let them know what's going on. I know a lot of teachers also use apps like Remind or Class Dojo. So utilize those so that you're communicating with the teacher, because the teacher can only fix what they're aware of is a problem. So just make sure you're communicating with them. And then also give your students some grace. So realize that your student's going to need to get up and run around a little bit. You know, they're going to have to go outside and play. It's really hard. You know, like in my classroom, my kids would probably sit down for 15 minutes or less of a 90-minute class period. And so to expect them to just sit in front of a computer all day long is going to be really difficult for kids. So just give them a chance to get up and be kids and play and run around and, you know, go outside with a Frisbee at lunchtime or something and play or kickball or something. So just realizing that your kids are kids and they still need those chances to just be a kid.
That's true. That's true.
And so Maureen hit every aspect I was going to point on.
Great minds think alike.
Certainly. And so to sum all that up, I would just say, you know, it may be an old cliche, but together we achieve more. And there's no one person that can do it all. There's no one person that knows it all. But if we stand together and we give each other gracious space, as she's mentioned earlier, and be patient and kind and loving to one another, then we'll conquer this thing called COVID and this pandemic, and we'll conquer this digital learning. And as she said before as well, once we do get back to regular face-to-face, then we can look back at it as we've gleaned some very critical soft skills that and technical skills that the students will need, as well as us as adults will need as we go forth into centuries to come. So, you know, and just be gracious with one another, and we'll get through it together.
Together.
We will. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Maureen, thank you for being with us. Tracy, thank you for being with us. Renata, thanks again for being a great co-host for Coffee Conversation.
Same to you.
Coffee Conversations is a part of our Cumberland Family Academy programming. And it is our goal to engage our families in conversations that will help us to nurture and foster relationships and share valuable information with you as we move forward through this time. So thank you again for joining us in this conversation with our teacher panel. They gave us some great feedback as we prepare for another school year. And don't forget, the next time you join us, you bring your coffee and we'll bring the conversation. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.